The following podcast is proudly brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use the link in the description and use offer code Broken Silicon to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy to make ramen. And also use the offer code Broken Silicon to get 25% off Windows keys and die shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website at cdkeyoffer.com. Now on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today, we're going to be talking a lot about VR again. I mean, I just talked to an anonymous Oculus engineer, which I highly recommend to anyone who hasn't listened to this one. That was a very illuminating discussion from someone within the industry, his thoughts on where Meta's going and their competition. But now I'm talking to someone else that, someone in the Broken Silicon Discord just said, hey, have you heard of SadlyItsBradley? I like him a lot. And I'm always, trying to feel out as many guesses as possible ahead of time. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, this guy really seems to know what he's talking about. And then when I reached out to you, you actually had some thoughts on recent things that we've been talking about on Broken Silicon and Moore's Law is Dead. And so it was timely. It wasn't forced to have you on right away. So yeah, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Bradley Lynch. I'm known on the internet as SadlyItsBradley. I basically do videos, analytical stuff on VR, AR technologies, and it's honestly very similar to your channel, except instead of silicon leaks, it's all like, hey, this is what I believe companies are working on. So yeah, that's me.
And with regards to VR, which is funny, this has been a huge blind spot to the type of products I've been following. I mean, of course, mostly what I follow is like Intel processors, then graphics cards, AMD processors. Every now and then there's a PlayStation or Xbox thing that gets in there. I'd say once every third blue moon, there's an Apple thing that sneaks in a leak somewhere. But VR, it really wasn't until I got a Quest 2 and then got into contact with some people at Meta and a couple people working on PSVR devices that I got interested in this. And then when I was talking to you via email, you brought up the Deckard and Valve's products. And I'm like, great, another thing I know absolutely nothing about, which means I should probably have you on sooner rather than later, because a lot of people consider Valve the best, or Valve comes to mind first for a lot of people when they think of VR.
Yeah, Valve, I mean, people, Meta is like definitely, they're known because of Oculus. They bought Oculus early on, but a lot of people don't realize that Valve has been kind of working on VR hardware since around the same time that Oculus first started. So they have a lot of dedicated people that are constantly working on it. The HTC Vive only really existed because of Valve, and then the Valve Index came out in 2019, and that's still, at least on Steam, the second most used headset, which is impressive for the price. There's a lot of respect for Valve in the hardware scheme. It's just people don't expect a company like Valve to be such a player in this space, but they have, especially for the enthusiast territory.
Well, what's interesting, though, about this space, and I was actually thinking this today as I was preparing the notes for our discussion, is this isn't, nothing's ever decided forever. You always see companies swing back, new companies pop up and compete, but I feel like we're getting very close to the put up or shut up phase for VR. What did we, first, Valve was basically, or Oculus, I should say, which then was bought by Facebook, was the option. Then Valve, then Sony launched PSVR and just outsold everyone by a factor of 10. But then Quest came out and doubled the sales of Sony. And I think seeing Meta do that to Sony could do it back to them, or Valve could do it to everyone again. I don't think we can rule out that no one's sold 100 million units yet. We're still looking at almost niche number. Not niche anymore, I'd say, but just a little better than that. And it's still anyone's game to win. My example I bring up all the time is PS Now, where like apparently that was just the streaming service, and then just like that, nope.
No, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, even the, coming from someone who's been like watching the VR industry for almost 6 years now, it's there was a lot of hype early on, but the actual product sales never reflected that hype. And even today, even with Quest 2 getting like what 10 million, maybe 15 million units sold, there's still this is still like seen as an emerging industry. The one big thing that is people expect that's going to change, and I know you mentioned PSVR 2, that's still the outlier, the VR only. But we'll talk about this probably more later. But the big reason why all these major players are hopping into VR, you always hear stuff about Apple and like ByteDance, who owns TikTok and with Pico and stuff, is there's a big push where you might not even hear the word VR. Everyone wants to do mixed reality now, which might apply to more consumer markets than just gaming, which might allow this industry for the VR users to flourish more.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm not even sure, like, it's a very open-ended question, but as someone who's followed VR since it's had its resurgence with the Oculus, Kickstarter, what has it been like to watch the swings back and forth from everybody? Because it would almost be like if the market was way smaller, but then, like, what if it just went from like Xbox to PlayStation to Nintendo back and forth, just crushing swings in market share? Has it been weird to follow who just these companies just wildly taking more market share than the other out of nowhere?
I think it's even still the fact that we've only had so few players in this industry. There's been like a lot of different markets. Like there's always been like kind of the enthusiast market, and that was where at the beginning Oculus and Valve were kind of competing with each other. And at least the first year, Valve and HTC were beating the Oculus for hardware sales. But then you mentioned PSVR came out, and that brought things to a more affordable level. Like everyone had a PS4 at that point, but at the same time, you couldn't compare a lot of the content and like the hardware at the PSVR with the higher end stuff that required a PC. And then the Quest 2 came out, and obviously, it, we could probably talk
Mhm.
about this later as well. But it came at like the perfect time to really do everything. Like we had just so like everything for PC VR especially was above MSRP. So anyone that wanted to get into enthusiast territory couldn't. But it was also just like a lot of things that were difficult to hop into this industry was removed. But I think now we're coming into now seeing kind of everyone's kind of agreeing that having some sort of standalone, they call it, capability inside of a headset,
Mhm.
when everyone's competing on that same level field, I think there's going to be a lot more like competition. And even to really answer your question since the beginning, there hasn't been really that much competition or like trying to one up each other in hardware, because the best competitor, they were not getting the units to convince the product, like the manufacturing lines, to develop new technologies that might push their devices even further, which we're actually starting to see a change in that now though.
Yeah, I mean, and there are a few outliers that this is I don't mean to derail the conversation, but I kind of want to ask, what do you think about Samsung and Google Cardboard? Because I remember they both made a big deal about it, and Samsung was like, "All right, bye." And Google Cardboard, I think, gets some credit for not trying to be that big of a thing and doing what it did as an entry point for basically free. But like, what do you think about those two things? Because again, if you go back and look, Samsung was talking about it a ton, and now they just never do.
Well, I think those products, when we come to like those are called 3DOF products. They don't have full motion tracking and everything. It's just like they track your head. And those products were, in my opinion, terrible for the entire industry, because now every time a new headset came out for years, people were like, "Oh, I tried a Google Cardboard. That must be what a VR experience is like." And they're usually like really
Mhm.
toned down experiences. And everyone who had a Google Cardboard or a Samsung Gear VR, because they were just giving those things away because they were just
Mhm.
trying to get rid of them. The retention rates for all of those devices were terrible. Like literally pick up once for 5 minutes and put it down. Um, so when we come to more today's hardware, there's still a little bit of an issue actually with retention rates. From what I hear, even about the Quest 2, and that's where the underlying thing is you can't push an industry until you fix the hardware problems to make something you would want to use more than once. And those previous products were not that at all.
No. Well, it's funny when I tried them out, I spent like $30 for some. At the time I had like one of the first actually 4K screen phones. And so I was like, well, this is the pixel density they say you should have. So I got a $30 phone holder VR thing. And I went into it just trying to see like, what does it feel like to be able to look around? I didn't
Right.
expect any more than that. But you're right. A lot of people might try that out and go, oh, so this is an interesting gimmick.
Yeah, right. And that's always been like it's been a meme even in my community for years is VR is a gimmick. I put cardboard on my face, And that's where we're always trying to leave that because it's a chicken and egg problem in this industry, and I think those products didn't help that at all in any way.
Well, so let me skip ahead then to this kind of general discussion here. And I just labeled this in the notes like PSVR 2 versus Quest 2 3 Pro, because there's really about a million Quest devices they're working on, versus Deckard versus Apple. Like, what do you think about, like, what do these different devices from these different companies, what do they each need to do well to succeed? Like, what's going to determine which one wins? Because I actually did talk to a contact at one of these companies today, like just kind of like what it takes to do this. And I've got fresh in my head some more thoughts about what it will take to go mainstream. But what are your thoughts about these upcoming devices?
I think when it comes to PlayStation VR, again, I always see them as the outlier. I think they're going to do very well for sales for that device. It's like even the hardware showing for that device, like when the PSVR 1 came out, they were using kind of like leftover R&D. They were using
Mm.
the motion controls and everything. It was something they honestly threw together with not much effort, and they sold so many of them. And every game they released for it did pretty well, like all
Yeah, it's
the
crazy
triple
how
A.
well that ran on the PS4 from 2013. It's absolute because I played Resident Evil 7 on a base PS4 bit, and I was like, "This is better than I expected it to be." To be honest, guys.
Yeah, it really was a really good product, and I think a lot of people that got into VR, like and stayed in VR, that was the headset for a lot of people. That introduction for the gaming side. I think PSVR 2 is going to do very well because they actually put a lot of R&D in it. They're coming with custom controllers. They have eye tracking, which a lot of headsets even today are like
Hmm.
that's changing now, but like it's been a while. We've been winning eye tracking for so many years, but
It's
that's a big.
almost it might be the first device to get it that sells a decent amount of units, which is kind of crazy. Like, why hasn't anyone else done this yet?
Yeah, it is crazy. Like I know Cambria later this year is going to have eye tracking and stuff, but yeah, that's a big proponent to. So anyway, when they actually push this great hardware with the great software, I think PSVR 2 is going to do great for gaming, just like PSVR 1. And then you have to think about, well, they have 10 million Quest 2s out right now,
Hmm.
but when I mean, it was funny because the recent Sony showcase, everyone was talking about the Resident Evil 4 remake, and they at the end they said there's going to be VR content or whatever, and people thought that was really funny because it was like late last year, early this year, on the Meta Quest 2, they
Hmm.
released the original Resident Evil 4 but in VR. So it's like if you compare the old version of Resident Evil 4 in VR, and then Sony's got this beefed up system, all this nice hardware, it's going to be hard for Quest 2 with its like almost 3-year-old Snapdragon chip to compete. Like
If it's
just the
lucky, it's
visuals.
close to Xbox One base performance. If it's
Yeah.
lucky, and it's really a little bit below that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that headset needs to do other than just graphics processing. Like even
Hmm.
just the tracking stuff takes up a lot of CPU power, and even the XR2 and the Quest 2 is underclocked. So it's going to be difficult for gamers, and that device was originally targeted to gamers. It's going to be hard for them to be like, well, why am I using this thing? I'm getting like beefed up mobile games versus the PSVR 2. But when you get into the higher end, which Meta, they're all about Cambria, which is a high end device. Valve, I believe, their Deckard is going to be a high end device, and Apple is going to be very high end device
Probably
as
not
well.
cheap with that
Yeah,
Apple name on it.
I mean, if you hear the specs that they're talking about for that thing, it is definitely like high end enthusiasts. But all these higher end devices, they're not really focusing on the VR gaming. they're big on the mixed reality, which is overlay the real world with cameras and like lidar and like IR projectors, and be able to have VR and automatically switch to an AR environment and be able to do stuff with your hands, finger tracking, be able to do productivity, entertainment, be able to throw giant high resolution monitors anywhere in your room. Just add more functionality to a high quality VR device. And those high end devices are also finally using new technologies like the lenses. The big issue, in my opinion, for VR adoption and retention has been these things have been giant bricks on people's faces for years. And the reason is they all have this in it. This is a
Hmm.
lens cup. This is empty space. And the reason they have to do that is because Fresnel lenses, they need a certain distance. But all these high end products are using new types of lenses, which are usually called pancake lenses, and they can
Hmm.
bounce the light and get that uh, this like almost like half the size. So the center of gravity is closer to your face. You'll be able to have much higher PVD displays by that. And it's just like all the things for the higher end are coming together to make VR, which is also AR as well, to finally a more consumer. It's not a gaming gimmick. It's becoming something more.
Yeah, and I'm just pulling this up because I'll just like I'll say I talk to people at Meta, so to a certain extent, I kind of know the roadmap literally for the next few years. And pancake lenses has been coming up in conversations a lot recently, but they are, I've been warned, very expensive.
Yes, yeah, they are more expensive. But I think I think everyone's adopting these lenses and just like so at the beginning, this VR resurgence really started or could happen because mobile phones took off as an industry.
Well, so can
Every
we agree that ideally, long term, the ultimate VR device is one that does everything inside of the headset? Like, if
Yeah,
we could do it,
yeah.
AAA gaming, it just removes so many of the wiring and tracking and whatever and latency issues just to do that.
That is definitely the dream case scenario that
The holy
every
grail, maybe.
yeah, the Holy Grail. And when we talk about Deckard, we'll talk about how ways that some of these companies like Apple are trying to get more performance out of their systems. Yeah,
But for me, like, I feel like no matter what happens in the next 5 years, unless something happens that makes VR just entirely unpopular, but I don't think it's going down, it's only gonna go up from here. I think no matter what, in 10 years and we're on, like, whatever well, they'll probably call it not even nanometer, like, whatever angstrom or marketing term they're using for their latest nodes, we'll be able to do this. We'll be able to bring frankly, performance that's probably flagship GPU coming out later this year to something that uses 25 watts 10 years from now. I think we definitely will with the latest nodes 3D stacking and who the heck else knows what they'll do. But until then, I do kind of feel like there is going to be this divergence in products where and I talked to someone about this recently. Like, if we're being honest, the Quest 2's internal SoC, its performance dropped at the perfect time. Like it dropped right when it could kind of do PS4, Xbox One games before the PS5 and Xbox Series X were really taken advantage of. So most things, if you put effort into it, you could make a way, way, way reduced quality version of any game that was out. But that's because it dropped right at the end of a generation when it was finally using that. I don't think that's going to cut it over the next few years. For me, I think we're just going to have to accept that you can't really do it in device easily without spending a lot of money. And it's going to come down to price. I think the Quest 2 and a lot of devices have nailed the experience. For me, it needs to be cheaper so people buy it. I don't know what you think about that.
well, I think there's again, this is related to, you talk about how pancake lenses, they're expensive right now. Well, if a lot of high end products, which will show why something like that will make your headsets way more comfortable, you want to use it more than 20 minutes, you'll want to pick it up.
Mm.
It's summer right now, it's freaking hot. I don't want to wear bricks on my faces. So, more companies that push the high end stuff, those things will be able to make it into the low end as well. But I do agree, like the Quest 2 has been what did come at the perfect time. Like they do deserve the success they got with that, like pricing it probably below cost to make them and stuff to push their
When it was
ecosystem.
100% below cost tag. We
Yeah,
know what the bomb is.
right. So like, yeah, that's also great. But there's just going to be things that improve the experience, I think, a lot more. And when you talk about what we need for processing, there's a lot of barriers to making headsets more comfortable other than the actual weight and like getting
Hmm.
displays to your face. Every headset on the market now still uses display processes that are basically based off of mobile phone displays. Well, that's an issue. That's fine on mobile phones. You can't see the pixels, but when you put a lens on top of it, and even
Hmm.
if you put a diffuser, there is still a you can still see a screen door effect, which there's a lot of that's an issue. Like you're not going to expect people to want to work in something like this if you can't read text very well, for example.
I don't have a link in the description, or maybe I will before I post this, but I saw a recent study came out where they tried this kind of like Zuckerberg fever dream of using this pass through VR device while you're working all day. And the overwhelming, you know, s- conclusion of the study is everyone hates this. Like no one wants to use this. They're getting sick. They're working slower, not faster. Putting a bunch of Minority Report stuff around you doesn't really help anyone do anything. Just use three monitors. Like at least right now, I'm not convinced that's really the use of VR. Although I'm sure like Apple's going to try to sell that. So we've talked about like using VR for productivity. We've talked about it for gaming. Yoda King writes in, actually, he's the one who recommended you for the podcast. And he says, "Hey, Tom and Bradley, I'm a big fan of you two. What do you think it'll take for VR games to have the same mainstream appeal as Call of Duty? In what place in the market do you think those big VR stores with a large amount of space and short, curated VR experiences have in the future as consumer VR gets better?" And I kind of want to use this as a springboard to what is going to make VR mainstream. Like, let maybe not grandma and grandpa using their iPads mainstream, but like a step above now to the point where like most gamers have a VR device. Not all, but
Yeah.
most hardcore gamers have one. If someone has a PS5, they probably have something. If someone has a gaming PC, they probably have a VR device. Like, is it going to be games? Is it going to be using something else? Or what do you think it's going to be?
I generally don't agree with a lot of what Meta targets for their ideas, but one thing I think that they are spot on about, they're very big on social presence in VR and like telepresence, which is the idea that hey, if we all meet up in something like VR chat or whatever god awful one they make, it actually is really beneficial. And if you look at like the numbers for VR chat, for example, which I know some people might not know this, but there is people that have made VR chat a lifestyle and they get very good retention numbers. I mean, it's because a lot of people, and these are, and VR chat's usually on enthusiast platforms. So the most
Hmm.
expensive, people will spend a lot of money to just get trackers they can put on their legs to do like full body tracking, they call it. And like that platform has become a lifestyle for people because it's so amazing to be able to just grab friends, visit any content they want, any world, and some of these have mini games and everything. There's a ton of benefit to the social process. So when you hear about Cambria, they're incorporating built-in eye and face tracking to
Hmm.
make their avatars look better. I think that will be very beneficial for people more than they think. As someone who also myself, I'm big on the social VR stuff. But then you start adding, okay, they're going to start putting past high resolution pass through cameras so you can actually see your environment. You can start doing a lot of interesting things, whether it's games or like just cool little tricks in your environment. Put up a theater in your house or empty wall if you have one. Well, that's just another feature added to VR. And then you can switch to a game at any time that's built for VR. I think it's like VR itself is not going to become mainstream right away. I think it's all these different features coming together and actually having a lot of benefit that's going to push it. And again, I hate to say this, but it's going to happen first in the high end. Like people are going to have to see these expensive devices. It's like how PCs back in the 80s, like they were ridiculously expensive. They were just glorified word processors back
Yeah, for
then.
like 2 to 3 grand. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
money. So today, like 5 grand. Yeah.
Right. I think XR devices before they hit the mainstream, they're going to be like that. They're going to start out they start out with gaming, but now they're starting to branch out to more uses and I think people will see it more as like the same progression as the early 80s computers.
So, all right. To play devil's advocate to that, though, isn't
Yeah.
that already happening Now, isn't there an argument it could follow the smartphone pattern where there was actually, which it did start out as expensive for the time, like $600 for an iPhone in that month in that time period's money is like a grand now. And like you had people like, oh, I'm not spending $600 for a phone. What do I really use it for? It's like, and I remember the jokes early on of like the Apple commercial was like, look at our trips to Italy and checking the stock market. Like they were targeting rich people for the early
Yeah.
iPhone for sure. But then it got cheaper. Everyone bought smartphones, and then no one wanted to pay more until everyone realized I use this constantly every day. And now there's $2,000 phones. Like, arguably, Apple's almost mid range compared to the stuff Samsung and Sony charge for some of their
Yeah.
highest end phones. So, do you not think there could be like what's going on right now? Couldn't that actually be what happened with the Gen 1 iPhone? And then but to get everyone to buy in, it has to become cheaper?
Well, I also do a lot of talks with industry people or like supply chain stuff. And even Cambria, which is a high-end device, it's not going to have nearly the same adoption rate as the Quest 2. That's just a given. They are packing so many cameras into the headset. Apple's doing something very similar, like just 14, 15 cameras per device. And right now, or I should say, the beginning of the year, those cameras per unit were pretty expensive. But just because these companies are ordering so many, more fabs are being built just for this one process. So even just the small sensor cameras that are mostly designed for computer vision or
Mhm.
eye-and face tracking, those costs are already coming down, even though it's just high-end devices. So again, it comes back to I think it's going to start in the high end, but because there's so much high end and so much innovation happening in the high end, there's going to be a lot more of these features coming to the low end later. And you see that even when Meta talks about it, they say, okay, we're going to work on all the best features in the high end, and we're going to pick the features that we think are most valuable or probably most cheapest the next year and put that in the Quest 3. So, like,
That's
I
an
even,
interesting point because I was talking to some people at Meta, and they were looking at the Quest Pro, which is codenamed Cambria or Monterey, as there's like 10 other code names,
yeah,
as
there's a
like
lot.
as a lot of them weren't very confident in it. Actually, the original price I saw was 1,500, and they might consider lower, and they were comparing it to $2,000 laptops internally, and I'm like, I don't think this is a laptop competitor, you guys. So, but you said maybe they'll just put this expensive thing out, and then the things people actually end up using, they use for the Quest 3. That is an interesting point I hadn't thought about. That's a
Yeah, like
beta test if you have the money.
exactly. Enthusiast first, then it trickles down. Like even for I do a lot of data mining, and Meta accidentally leaks some special prototypes in the Quest firmware. So we even see like a prototype of Quest with like some eye and face tracking cameras that are clearly not meant for Quest 2. So you can be like, okay, well, Meta, their social media company, they value the camera stuff. It's very likely that feature is going to make it to the next low end device. They're basically trying to recreate a social media network, but in VR. I think for them, they want that feature first, so it does kind of align with their principles as well. But yeah, it could not happen. Um, yeah, for sure.
Well, everything you've said about the Quest Pro, though, yeah, no, that's what they're doing. It's just I don't know that they're sure what they want to do with the next one, but let's just say this though, because this leads into a reader mail here. Let's say whatever Quest device out of the 20 they're working on is out at the time. They're going to have something around a grand, let's say 500 to $1,000 that's high end and wireless. And then on the other end, PSVR 2 might be $300. All right. Reese, what's wrong? Heat getting you down? No? You're paying too much for Windows keys? Well, come on, you know you don't have to do that by now. After all, it's certainly been no secret that CDKeyOffer.com has been a reliable sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead for years. They're the go-to place that I recommend my fans use for getting PlayStation, Microsoft Office, and Windows operating system keys for reasonable prices. You don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of the percentage of your build's price on a Windows operating system, go to cdkeyoffer.com to get a legitimate, reliable key to build your new system without wasting too much money. I use them to make the Alder Lake system next to me for benchmarking graphics cards, and if I build a Zen 4 or Raptor Lake system this fall, you can bet I will be going to cdkeyoffer.com right away to get a reasonably priced Windows 11 key. If you do go to cdkeyoffer.com, make sure you use the offer code BrokenSilicon to get 25% off Windows software and DieShrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. They even sell gaming chairs, mice, and keyboards right now. It's a good place to go to get reasonably priced products and to also show your support for Moore's Law is Dead. Go to cdkeyoffer.com today. Barrig writes in, he says, "Hey, Tom and Bradley, considering the high cost of the index, or considering the cost is high still to this day, do you think that Valve will have to adjust its planned MSRP of the Deckard and at least the entry models of its variants as well as that of the index to compete with the Quest 2 and the successors at lower MSRPs? I personally always wanted to get into VR, but never had the funds until recently, so I'm really interested in what the next generation of VR and AR devices will bring to the table. Like, can they afford to make this whole thing $1,000 again?"
I don't think Valve is going to directly compete with the Quest 2 on price. One thing that people it's kind of an outlier because Valve released the Steam Deck, which was, that was it $400 for the base unit, which is a pretty
Yeah.
good price. But when it comes to VR, I don't think Valve is a company that likes to compete to the bottom. I think they're very big on like trying to push hardware. And the reason why I think this more than anything else is people are like, well, they have to compete with the Quest 2, or otherwise they're not going to sell units. The Index still sells very well, surprisingly. I don't even know why. It's almost 3 years old at this point, even though I use it daily. But at the very least, if you look at the Steam, you can look at the Steam hardware charts, and the most used headset on Steam, 50% of users use the Quest 2. You might be like, oh, that Valve must be worried. But the way I see it is, Meta is cutting the bill on losing on every unit, and people are plugging it into Steam's platform where they make most of the money. They're not going to make money on hardware. They already have their platform. So the way I see it is, Valve will push the high end again, because, I mean, Quest 2, you can plug it in, you can connect it wirelessly to Steam VR, and that's what most people are doing as a budget PC VR device.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, no matter what happens, they can't really afford to try to be the volume winner. Like,
Yeah.
they own the store. They're always going to be the premium device, at least in this space. The only reason they're the budget device in handheld PC gaming is because, frankly, they no competition. If we're being completely honest here,
Yeah.
um, but I guess, yeah, and I guess I've been reading a lot about what Meta's worried about recently, and it's funny, they only ever really bring up, like, Apple. They don't even really consider the others competitors at this point, and except that they're worried, like, Amazon's gonna get involved and just make some $200 Amazon Basic VR device and spit them out like crazy, and I'm not really sure. I guess that probably would threaten Meta, and Valve would be like, "Whatever, we've still got our $1,000 device," right?
Yeah. I mean, again, Valve makes so much money on people also want to bring up Meta, how like they're struggling right now financially because their ads business is just not a very, like, they still make a ton of money for sure, but you see the rate of where things are going.
Mm,
iPhone activated privacy feeding features that just tanked their ads business a lot, right? So their basis of their business is just difficult, and they have to transition to VR. Whereas Valve, their basis is Steam, and even today, Steam Summer Sale, they're making billions and billions of dollars. Their moneymaker is Steam. So if they just have that platform, have CBR, every hardware, I mean, even the closest competitor to the Quest 2 today, even, it's called the Pico Neo 3 and the Neo 3 Link, which is from the company who owns TikTok. That's near the price, and they literally sell a cable just so you can plug it into a PC, and it uses Steam VR. So it's
mhm.
like, what is pushing Valve from a perspective to compete against the low end when they would
They can never
rather?
win that battle. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I guess that's That's an interesting point. And then I guess just to put a pin in this part of the conversation for now, you don't see PSVR as really directly competing with them. You said that's now, I think you said it's an outlier. Does that mean it's not a competitor or it's more of a wild card?
I think it's a wild card because I see every company trying to push out of gaming. Even the Meta Quest 2, it started as a gaming device, but you can see they're adding a lot of features that are not really gaming focused. They're trying to give a lot of that software that they're working on for Cambria and adding it to the Quest 2. Um, so I think for PSVR 2, that'll be probably the best device for gamers for a while if they want a VR gaming device, is really where I'm kind of standing at.
But right, and as someone who's used VR for a while, you don't see your VR device as strictly a platform for just a few games. You see it as a platform for doing all different types of things, and at least right now, it doesn't right seem like PSVR is going to have those non-gaming apps yet.
I just think again, the big thing happening right now is an AR focus, especially. There's a ton of ridiculous hype over mixed reality. Maybe even a little too much hype. I think it might fall back a little bit to the VR side. But all these companies are realizing that AR glasses, the concept of AR glasses, are impossible right now. So,
hmm
but they want to build these platforms, especially when Meta is kind of just controlling the space. And I do agree, Meta's horrified of Apple. Like Apple has every advantage over them, just from like there's a lot more trust in Apple. They have the supply chains that Meta can't bring, and they have the ecosystem. Like every iPhone is technically already an AR device that you can scan your environments
hmm
with LiDAR and do all the things. So Meta doesn't have that. They have their headsets, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it. Yeah, it would. They just from what I heard, the Quest Pro was actually supposed to come out last year, but the
Yeah, it's
pandemic
supposed
caused
to.
them to delay it. And if they would have been out a year early, that would have been such an advantage, I suppose. But at this point, you're right. Like Apple could just come out and be like, and Apple has their custom SoCs that they're designing that are very efficient. They have the software infrastructure and the fan base that will probably buy it up, and they have a lot of business. Like a lot of businesses just use iPhones now. They don't use Blackberries anymore. So yeah, I don't know what even to say about this part of it, except that I think we're both just starting to agree a lot that Made is in a precarious position.
Well, did you watch all that? It was like last week or this week. Meta just like dumped a bunch of other prototype work in video form.
I heard about that, but I didn't watch it. Yeah.
I was shocked that they like. I was not expecting something like that. It was like a bit of a like cry for help to me, but I know people might not agree about it because like they were saying at the very end of all these videos, they shown like a very concept device. Like
Mhm.
they didn't have a prototype or anything. They were like, "Oh, we're gonna have something called reverse pass through, which is like they'll show like eyes on the outside for people that are looking at the headset." And the reason why I know it sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous to everyone the VR community as well. But Apple is apparently very bullish on that feature and are even including an outer OLED display just to show eyes to people watching them. So like, and like they show this concept off. It has like a lot of like like a lot of the same rumored specs and form factor of the
Mhm.
Apple headset. And they're like, oh yeah, we're not going to reach that for like 8 years or something.
Honestly, what you're describing sounds a lot to me like Intel's presentations lately. I don't know how much you follow like the leaker space and like Intel and stuff, but it usually goes Intel reveals this crazy looking thing with 50 chiplets and they're like comes in 2025 and then you go with an asterisk, nothing we've announced actually comes out when we say it does. And then AMD's like, we have this thing that's mostly as good that comes out next year and it actually will.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I do think like I think Meta's not going to like die in this space, but I do think when people compare Cambria versus whatever Apple is working on, people are gonna be like, why would I invest in Cambria in comparison? It's again a lot of the same features, but Apple has the custom silicon. They have the higher end chips that are also custom silicon in their own way. So yeah, it's madness.
All right, so I want to start transitioning the discussion into more traditional fare. When I reached out to you via email, you said one of the things you noticed recently from my content and that you wanted to talk about directly was the Little Phoenix leak. So I mean, I guess just let me ask openly right here, like what caught your eye about Phoenix in general from AMD, which for those listening, because a lot of people listening are probably, just fans of you. This is the APU coming out next year from AMD is kind of the standard APU. They're going to have smaller ones, bigger ones. This is the main one, and it's going to be, you know, 50 to 80% better than the previous gen, like they typically do every year. This is what they're going to have as the standard thing, competing with i7s and i9s and i5s and laptops. So what caught your eye about that upcoming APU from AMD?
So I know we didn't have much time to talk about the Deckard, which is Valve's next headset, but really,
Talk
I'm
about it now, then, if you
yeah,
want
it's
to.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Yeah. So I'm even though I cover leaks from multiple companies, I think I am the the main one that everyone knows. Like, okay, Brad's the Valve shill. He always wants to leak Deckard and follows that project religiously. Well, it's been notable for a while that Valve has been working to this goal of releasing a standalone x86 VR headset.
You say known for a while. When did you first know about it, and like what was the indication of that?
I think I started this summer of last year, actually. So around summer of last year is when I really started pushing it. Before the Steam Deck was announced, I was like,
Hmm.
this is. I see a lot
Okay.
of things that are leading up to this. Yeah, but and then later on, Valve even started even admitting at like press conferences for the Steam Deck that yeah, we are interested in doing this. We are interested in having an x86 chip like the Steam Deck one inside of a VR headset in some way. They obviously weren't going to go into detail about that, but they did hint a lot of that multiple times, especially with the launch. Gabe Newell was saying, "Yeah, this is the step to that full standalone PCVR experience for them." And it also makes sense from a business perspective. Valve does not want to create an ARM store for Steam. They just want to just
True.
build a unit that can play their entire Steam store and push
And they're
that
putting
further.
all this effort into making x86 Windows games work on Proton in their own operating system. That could arguably be the groundwork for a new device that will natively run these games in VR. Interesting.
And you know what? I mean, a lot of people don't know this, and I think it's hilarious because Valve is a company. When they leave stuff in the code and like name things, they know their community are ravenous, are just gonna like data mine it, and so they'll purposely leak stuff out there all the time, and it benefits me. But
AMD
SteamOS,
does that too, by the way.
yeah,
Like, I mean,
and it's
they know
fun.
people look at it.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's great. It's organic marketing, and I like it. But SteamOS 3, which is what released with the Steam Deck, they completely changed their code name scheme for their operating system. They used to name it after Dota 2 Heroes or something, the older versions, but for this, they named it Holo. And if you combine the idea of Holo and it released on the deck, you combine those words
Yeah.
together, hilarious. And I don't, it's just, they're nerds and they do that fun stuff. So yeah, I do believe everything that they worked on for Steam Deck was R&D that they probably either pushed or did stuff for their headset, and they were like, okay, well, we did all this R&D. There's this market that we can tap into with our R&D, which was the handheld market, and they released something. But so last year, this is where the picture of Deckard and like um, it really became clear because there was a version of SteamOS 3 that a Valve employee accidentally uploaded onto a more public Steam discussion board than he was. I don't think he realized it was as public as it was. He was trying to help out a developer recover their firmware for their dev kit, and he deleted it 5 minutes after uploading it. But again, Valve people are crazy. They backed it up, and in that version, that backup of SteamOS 3, there was only 3 references to VR in the Deckard, which is a confirmed code name. Like the Ars Technica said, it's confirmed. They have sources and everything. And in that, it was very confusing because they had a entire system that was dedicated to reporting thermals of a Snapdragon type chip
Hmm.
to the x86 SteamOS 3 or whatever. So while I was like kind of confused, I was like, okay, well, Valve was saying for a while they must be wanting to do an x86 chip. Then why are they having prototypes with a Snapdragon chip this late in development for this headset? And then I like to look at their patents. They don't publish many patents. They're not like Apple, who releases like 100 patents a week or whatever. And you can make connections from data mining things and their patents they have and stuff. And you can see they're very big on this idea, and Apple is too, by the way. They're doing almost the exact same thing, where they want to pair like an ARM chip to do a lot of stuff like take in camera sensor data, do a lot
Mm.
of interesting stuff. And I think that Valve wants to, at some point, maybe not at launch, I'm not really sure, but have like a compute unit that either straps to the back of your head or something that would connect directly to the front. So you do this, it's called
Oh,
split
that's a good
rendering a
idea.
little bit, kind of. They have patents on it, but the idea is like the chip on the front, it's low power. It does a lot of the sensor data, it does reprojection on board, it does a lot of things, and also enables wireless. If you don't want that compute unit, you can connect wirelessly to a PC, for example, like a Wi-Fi SoC. So it behaves very similar to how a Quest 2 would work with your PC via AirLink, except the idea is that they're just tailoring it to work together with an x86 thing.
Can I raise my hand?
Yeah, go for it.
um, I mean, and here's a funny reference too to like how simple this would be to add on to a device like this. I recently had someone in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord ask, has anyone considered like adding an add-on battery to the Quest 2 so it has longer battery life? And I'm like, well, that's the first thing people thought to do. And
Mhm.
he's like, oh, how much does it cost? And I was like, to be fair, like it's powered by USB-C to charge it. You can literally use any power bank if it has enough amperage output with you just put it in your pocket, put a cord
Mhm.
and plug it in. Like what you're describing, I don't see why you couldn't design practically a Quest 2 clone that uses an XR2, but
Mhm.
then have a USB draw thing plug into it from the Steam like deck of cards, if you will. Like they could literally make kind of like a, I don't know what was it called? Uh, PlayStation TV, that little like brick that was its
Yeah.
own Vita. I mean, why can't you do that with the Steam Deck and then have a few USB ports on it? If you want to plug it into a monitor and just have the most portable gaming desktop on earth, hey, there you go. But if you made it small enough, you could just slot it into a cage on the back of your head, plug a thing in, and now they have this device they can. Well, you can use it for office PCs. Put it on the back of a on the back of a display. You can use this thing again like a portable gaming device, or you can use it as arguably an upgradable thing too. Like they could sell the second version, it just slots in on the back of your head. I hadn't heard about this or thought about it. This is a common sense idea that would play into their entire ecosystem.
Exactly, and you see all these changes with DisplayPort, like everyone's switching to USB C just to run DisplayPort and power and everything through the cable. Like it would fit marvelously. And then, like, talking about how they could, they could release Little Phoenix or whatever 1 year and have that be the thing that connects to the headset. Well, people can keep that good
Mm-hmm.
front part, and then again, when that back part has a new version, they can just slot that in, keep the same headset, even though it's high end, it's upgradable like a PC is. Like the PC VR community is used to upgrading PCs. At the same time, Valve doesn't have to spend so much R&D on the back, and like whenever they decide, okay, well we now got to work on the front part again. Let's start spending R&D only on the
Mm-hmm.
front. It's just a continuous cycle that I think would benefit Valve immensely in the long term.
And this avoids one of the major pitfalls that I've heard from people working at Meta on the Quest 3 is they don't there's a big internal struggle going on inside Meta right now over price. Like we've
Mhm.
already hinted at it. Like they're worried about the what did they call it? The Fire VR. Like from
Yeah.
Amazon getting
Yeah.
pumped out for $200. You go onto Amazon and search VR. Amazon recommended our VR device for $200. And so they're not sure what to do. What do we do with resolution? Do we make a new controller? Do we put a better APU in there? It's not really as strong as a PS5. So what's the point in putting this in there? If you just make it upgradable, you avoid all of those issues.
and it's still and it's still, you can still release something that benefits people that have their giant PC rig at home, which is the core of a lot of people on Steam, because it'll still work the same way. You can run a wire or do
Hmm.
Wi-Fi and just connect it to your Omega strong rig that people have anyway. So a lot of customizability on what their customers might want to do with it. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Like you could even see like a fan, like 3D print a laptop chassis that it slots into and then slot a battery into it. That'd be funny.
Yeah,
You could
yeah.
do that. Yeah, I mean, I guess then this brings me to, like, I think the most important question, and I think this is a brilliant idea. Now I'm excited. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't think about, like, this upgradable micro desktop that you can keep swapping out between things." That's just such common sense. But, do you think it would really be strong enough, though? And I did include in the notes for our discussion a comparison of the APUs of the last few years from AMD. I don't think Little Phoenix is quite there. And I know you have a video where you yeah, let me ask that. I know you have a video where you hooked up the Steam Deck to a VR to, like, did it work well with frame rates that worked? Did you, like, try Half-Life Alyx on Van Gogh's 8 compute units?
Some people have. I haven't done too much myself. I just kind of re-reported what other people have done. Some people have gotten okay stuff. Some people have gotten terrible performance, but I think for what it is, it's not even optimized software wise for it. You still have to run Steam VR. You have to still do all these
Mm,
processes, and it still can do some things that I find impressive. The one thing I really want to bring apart about all of this is there's a lot of systems in Steam VR that show that Valve have ideas to offload a lot of that processing onto the actual headset itself. Like there's something called a standalone system layer in the Valve internal menu. And if you turn that on, that turns off a huge heavy process in Steam VR alone that they can now just have it focus on the game. So I think a lot of it is
mm.
software. Because if you compare, honestly, like for all the benefits, if you compare even just the Van Gogh chip to the XR2 chip, I mean, you could probably see there would be a pretty equal amount of like at least equal or more performance.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
I would say Van Gogh is easily 30% minimum better than the XR2. To be honest, it's probably up to twice as powerful.
right, and if this idea catches on and Valve goes for it, developers have been getting very used to recently optimizing VR games for low end hardware. I mean, the Quest 2, the one benefit Quest 2 has is because it's sold in so many units, every developer is developing their games for Quest 2 first and foremost right now,
Mhm.
because that's where the money is. So they've had to learn all these tricks to get a full fledged VR game working on this 3-year old mobile SoC. So, and this is another, I'm sorry, I love talking about this, but another thing that they
That's why you're
introduced,
here, man. Go on.
yeah, yeah. Another feature they introduced with the Steam Deck that was like, oh my god, that would make so much more sense for an optimized version for an x86 standalone headset. And this is a feature not many people know about, but developers can have an own depot of files built just for optimized for the Steam Deck. So, like, let's say the main PC
Mhm.
game has high resolution 4K textures. Well, a developer can even have a different depot with their Steam game to upload a lot lower quality stuff so it runs well on the Steam Deck. They could do something very similar to that for a standalone x86 VR headset. The actual infrastructure for that is already built into Steam. So when I see all the things that Valve is doing for the Steam Deck, I'm like, that makes total sense how they can transition it to a VR headset.
Yeah, I mean, the part that you're convincing me of the most is the thing that I always would push back on, and it's something I can point to right now with Valve is not Microsoft. They're not even Sony. Like, you look at the size of their market, like, of their market cap, it's, my god, is it a smaller company?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and a lot of people complain about not being able to get a Steam Deck, and the answer I always give people is Sony's having trouble making enough PS5s. How much weight do
Mhm.
you think they're throwing around at TSMC right now versus
Right.
Valve guys?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, but that means, they will only work on things that have cross pollination and synergy, to use that overquoted uh, corporate term, between a bunch of their stuff. But what you're describing is direct benefits between all of these things, and that's why it's worth the effort.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Again, they call this, it makes no sense for them to have a reference to the Holo deck for a handheld gaming PC. Yet SteamOS 3 is called Holo. And like
Hmm.
there's a lot of small things just like that. It makes no sense actually. If you think about it, going back to that leak with the ARM chip, why does a Steam Deck firmware backup have systems to communicate with a VR headset? So again, it's just they're taking a lot of stuff, giving just building off of it, all that R&D they're doing internally.
Well, and so I guess I want to touch on this though, the idea of Valve using the processing of an XR2 for all of the tracking and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, that's mostly CPU though, right? The GPU is not doing that. And in the comparison of the notes we have here, I'm only focusing on GPU performance. I'm not really worried about Phoenix having a good enough CPU or even Little Phoenix. I think the CPU is good enough for gaming in 90 hertz or whatever or higher. But how much it is just the CPU though, right? Like,
Mostly CPU for sure, yeah.
and I guess though theoretically they could totally offload some of that if they wrote it specifically for that. If you connected it with USB, I guess there's no reason it'd take work, but it's the PS4 had an ARM chip for background tasks. They can do that.
And then there's also the benefit when you think about like I agree that they would offload all the CPU stuff or the tracking stuff onto the ARM chip for sure. And then use that to communicate the data to the graphics chip that only has to mostly do the game for the most part.
Hmm.
But also, you also think about graphics processing. Every high-end headset is including eye tracking, so we're finally starting to get that foveated rendering that
That's true.
the industry has been talking about for a while. And for PSVR 2, Unity did a keynote about this. They get at least 2 times the performance
Yeah.
with eye tracking. So that is a good number.
And just to touch on that too, I've talked to some people working on the PSVR too, and they're like, "Do not sleep on the stuff being shown about foveated." They're like, "Look, that's like an up to. Most games aren't going to double their frame rates because of it, but I've heard they're like, no, we're getting 20 to 50% more performance in some games due to foveated rendering. We're not worried about running the PSVR's resolution at 120 hertz. Actually, it's going to be fine."
Yeah, and another big thing people don't realize is reprojection technology. That's where a lot of headsets they might not be able to hit their max frame rate, which is like around 120 hertz usually.
Hmm.
So sometimes the game data will only send 60 hertz, and then a chip will. Well, for PCVR, your PC has been doing all of that. It's been doing
Hmm.
the tracking, it's been doing the game, it's been doing the Steam VR overlays, it's been doing the reprojection. But there's a lot of benefits to actually having the chip on the headset, ARM chip, do the reprojection for you. I even think PSVR 2, they're using like some sort of like I don't remember what kind of chip, but they have some sort of chip on board, and I think that they're probably also looking to do
How much do you
reprojection
know
on.
about that? Because I haven't actually paid that much attention to PSVR2 recently. So I would assume it has to have some chip, obviously, just to turn on inside of it. But like, do you know how good the chip is? I assume it's weaker than the XR2s.
Yeah, it's nothing as serious as the XR2, but it is something that they can still do, again, something like reprojection on board. Because even the PSVR 1, they had that link box, and that was doing reprojection before it sent to the headset finally. So very similar concept. It's nothing like an XR2, but it's on board this time.
Not to get off subject, but the reason I bring that up is when I brought up that I didn't like that it had a USB-C connection to one of my contacts. Because I knew they had prototypes that were wireless. And I'm like, come on, do it, make it wireless. He said, yeah, I don't know what that's about. They didn't really need that. And I'm like, so you confirm like it works wirelessly. I wonder how good the processor in it is and how much RAM is inside of that. Because I also think, again, to the idea of like, well, all we know is this thing needs USB-C as far as we can tell for power. Like, is there a chance they could sell an adapter to make the PSVR2 wireless as an upgrade? I'm a little skeptical of that, but that's
Yeah.
something I'm kind of wondering if you think that could be possible too.
I haven't looked into it much myself. The only thing I worry about is probably is that I know the cord itself is like embedded directly into that unit.
Oh, okay.
So that adds a big issue. So I don't know if you can actually remove
So
the
they'd
entire
probably
head.
have to make like a box you put in your pocket or something.
Yeah, that's where I see it for sure.
Well, going back then to Phoenix, I want to ask about this question again, though, kind of like, all right, so with foveated rendering, I'll give you it. I definitely think Big Phoenix is strong enough. Actually, I thought
Mhm.
Big Phoenix was strong enough anyways. Like it is. Like it's probably and there's a lot of consternation online about how good it is. But if we're being honest, guys, like let's forget inside sources for a second. AMD publicly said RDNA 3 is 50% more performance per watt than RDNA 2. So I think Phoenix is probably That's the minimum, maybe 60% better than, what was in Rembrandt, because they're not gonna make their APU use more power in a laptop. So, I think once you get that much stronger, you're just about at that RX 480 performance level, which is still, as I put in the notes here, this is a 2016 $240 GPU. I guess, is that what you want, though? Like, I know that that's exciting that they can probably do that in an APU, but we're talking about something that is about the performance of, like, a $400 console from 6 years ago. That's not that impressive. Like, do you want VR to push graphics more? Like, because if this happens and it takes a ton of market share, I wonder how many people who are fans of VR are worried about the idea of, well, but I want the graphics to get better. We're getting to the point where games are starting to look a little smartphony, even using an RX 480.
Yeah, it is like one of those things where like you're always going to sacrifice something for the full standalone experience, no matter what. Even we'll have to talk about this in a minute, but Apple, they're rumored to have an M2 chip inside of their VR headset, which
I
I,
heard there's overheating issues, by the way. I've heard that that's the rumor that Meta's worried about, but that now they're saying that they have massive overheating issues.
yeah, that's been like the industry talk, but it sounds like from more recent things that they figured it out. I don't know how. Maybe they're toning down the wattage or
I
something.
was gonna say just clock it lower.
Yeah, but like the one interesting thing about that headset, and this is where things get like really weird and like I so 2019 there was a really bizarre rumor that was reported by Digitimes, and even though they don't have like the best track record, it was one of those things that was like hard to ignore at the time. But they said that Valve and Apple were teaming up on an AR headset or something.
Oh, I think I remember that. Yeah, with Digitimes, my concern with them, because they have, especially recently, got quite a few misses, is just
Yeah,
that they only know, like, if they're looking at a painting, they only see a fourth of it, and you might be like,
right.
"That's a boat," and it's like, "No, it was an airplane, and an airplane's not a boat." You know?
Yeah, yeah. But I will say that that article made me go on to like a research spree a little bit, and it led me to a company I think that they might have both been interested in for designing OLED on silicon displays, and I think that's where maybe some of the things came out. But when you compare what Apple is rumored, like all the specs that Apple's wanting to work on for their headset, they want to have like like they call it Bora, which is like an A14 type chip, like what's an
Mhm.
iPhone, but also the M2 chip. And they want those chips they want to offload the processes on the A14 chip and then have the M2 chip do all the
Mhm.
graphics rendering and everything. And then you hear what I've been talking about, what Valve seems to be wanting to do, where they're taking a Qualcomm chip and then pairing it later on with an x86 SoC or whatever. So it's like you see a lot of cross pollination of ideas there, and then you see it's just very interesting because I think yeah, you are going to have to sacrifice a lot just to get that full standalone. Will people do it? I guess we're going to have to find out at these high costs, because when you start talking about the
Mhm.
multiple chips and everything and the high resolution displays, they're going to be high costs. But at the same time, you also think about if not everyone has to do it, they still have to build a PC to begin with for some people, and some people already do that. So because there's always going to be a choice, is what I'm saying. There's always going to be that sacrifice. These things cost battery life. These things like have their own issues, and I don't think any company knows for sure what's going to be best. Meta doesn't seem to be doing any of this. They're just still relying on the XR2 chip to do
Yeah.
everything. You know,
There's a lot of,
so
like, treading water going on there right now. It's a bit odd.
yeah. So what is going to win? Are people willing to sacrifice huge performance for the most thin and light, low power everything, or are people going to want to go to the other extreme? I think time will tell for that.
Well, I think the good news, though, and why I like what you've been describing with Valve's holodeck approach so much, is that they don't care. I mean, they do. They want
Mhm.
everything they make to sell 100 million. But at the same time, like, they're going to make a headset that works with a desktop you know, high fives all around. And then if you want, you can add this device that I'm assuming will also plug into a TV and work as a portable gaming console as well. So at least there's that added functionality when this thing becomes $1,000 or something of like, yeah, but you can bring this anywhere, plug in a keyboard and use it as your laptop, man. Or, like you don't have to only use it for this. That's why I think they might have an ace up their sleeve with that one. Although it's funny, I was talking to someone in the comments section on YouTube about like, could they overclock Phoenix enough, Little Phoenix enough? Which, for those who don't know, I mean, we're looking at something that's between 50 to 100% better than Van Gogh. So you're looking at honestly Rembrandt performance now, but using less energy. I think if they pushed it to 25 watts, they could get to that performance. But again, at that point, I was like, so you're overclocking the smaller one to get to near the performance of the big one. Isn't this going to be $1,000? Just pay for the big one, man.
Yeah.
And that's where I wonder with Little Phoenix, but I guess they could sell both. They could sell a little and big version and whatever you want to pay for. They just say, hey, this is barely good enough. This one's easily good enough.
And isn't like these processors starting to add like neural processing units to them?
They are, and AMD's been very quiet about what that means. Like they have this acronym under the Phoenix information on their roadmap. It's like Phoenix, 4 nanometers, Zen 4, RDNA 3, AIE, AI engine. So they're not really saying what that means, but yes, it has that.
Yeah, so that's always very beneficial for the XR people because there's a lot of computer vision involved in what we do, especially as things are moving more toward computer enabled tracking, whether that's hands, fingers, mapping out environments and stuff. Having a core just focus on doing that, and these SoCs or APUs is something notable, I think, from coming from the XR side.
Yeah. All right, let me start transitioning into some reader mail questions here. So QH Freddy writes in and he says, do you think there will be a Mega APU for consumers? So when I say consumers, I'm not talking about a console in the foreseeable future. Something that actually performs in the ballpark to one of the latest 128 to 192-bit dedicated GPUs. I've become more and more certain actually that this is not going to happen since the market for one of those devices is small and basically always better served by a less powerful integrated GPU combined with small to medium sized dedicated cards. The cost for increased memory bandwidth to the dedicated GPU level is just too high for the size of that market. And I think this has been a big discussion. I did videos 2 or 3 years ago now talking about where APUs could go if AMD really pushed it, but they've really kind of gotten lazy with how hard they pushed APU graphics. And if you actually like look at the increase in performance of their APUs, it's like almost 1-to-1. Just divide the latest DDR speed. Like that's the increase in GPU performance. They're not bothering to push it at all. So like, what do you think we're going to see them like finally push something with like some amount of infinity cache on die HBM or something for a laptop, or do you think it just doesn't make sense compared to putting a GPU with it?
I think they'll only do it if someone gives them a ton of money. I don't think there's any benefit. Like even like we're talking about how Steam Deck doesn't have any competitors. All the competitors it does have, they're still using the APUs that are available, and I think most markets will continue to do that. In my opinion, I don't know how you feel about it.
So I think I mostly agree with QH Freddy that at this point, look, if AMD wants to, there's enough room on AM4 and certainly on AM5 socket. They could make something like right now that has like, I mean, honestly, if they used Vcache, they could probably give it 64 megabytes of infinity cache. They could probably give this thing 32 compute units and like they could do it. It's just who is buying this $400 APU instead of a $300 graphics card that for a system they already have? And I think for now, AMD is just more migrating towards a more like what Intel's been doing for a while, but every now and then they throw something out for a specific customer. And until they see a huge opening, the only opening I would see is that it's just cheaper to ship a CPU without any cooler, like on a graphics card and stuff. But at the same time, APUs are getting good enough that you can kind of game in 1080p already. So I don't see why they would push into the $400 realm. I think they're
Right.
always going to keep it sub 300, which means just a better than average APU, not a mega one. Um, Marvolo Riddle writes, and he says, "Hey, Tom and Bradley, with AMD and Apple having a massive advantage over Intel in terms of efficiency, what do you think Intel's response to Phoenix should be if AMD is ahead in both performance and battery life with Phoenix and Dragon Range? The laptop market is one of the few PC market segments left with decent growth and efficiency, and I think that's going to be important for VR headsets as well if that market takes off."
On my
I'll let you
side,
go first. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. On my side, I think for VR in general, I don't think CPU is really the issue at this point. I think everyone cares more about the GPU power when it comes to VR headsets. And one benefit that another thing I just want to bring up real quick before I let you go is one benefit GPUs are starting to have now is more bandwidth. Like they're starting to seemingly adopt like DisplayPort 2.0. Like again, it's all about GPU on the VR side. Like CPU, great to have, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you think? What I think the response is to Phoenix and Apple. Nothing's changed. Intel just doesn't want to be behind. Intel's lost the Apple contract, and I mean, their response is trying to catch up with their nodes and maybe stop delays. That's why when I've been talking about recently for those listening about Meteor Lake being delayed from the beginning of next year to later in the year, I'm like, okay, like that was your chance to catch up, and I don't think there's anything Intel can do besides get a hold of whatever's making them keep delaying every product. Um, Swiggles writes in, he says, with a rush of at least vaguely compelling low end hardware, a glut of current gen GPUs, and most computers still using quad core CPUs, and mainly bare minimum GPUs, do you think the time will soon be here where maybe perhaps next year when people will finally give in and raise the low end standard meaningfully, or will it still be GTX 1060s as the standard for the next 3 years? And I think this is an interesting question. Like, because that still basically is the minimum. And I guess we've already kind of touched on that question, but like, what do you think about this being the minimum still for games? Like, do you think we're finally going to get to a point where these people get rid of their what are now very low end GPUs?
Uh, it's kind of a interesting question because I'm more thinking of it as like, it, yeah, I think it's gonna be more beneficial. From like it's been so hard to get good price GPUs in general, and I know people for a fact that even who bought a Quest 2, coming from the VR side again,
Hmm.
they've been wanting to build a good price PC to do VR. If there's a glut of GPUs, even secondhand, that would be great. But I think really what it comes down to is we're also seeing a huge, seemingly change. I think from like Sony and Microsoft, who are now finally deciding, yeah, we're going to actually start focusing more on porting AAA games to PC. And I guess it depends on what they what they think is low end at that point. I feel like they're gonna for a couple more years though, still kind of target like the 1060 as the lowest end, in my opinion, just to make it easier for adoption.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it hinges on, I think to directly answer Swiggle's question, I would just say, I think it is finally going to happen. I think there's been a bunch of reasons why we've been stuck on kind of the PS4 and then 1060, which I'm not saying those are the same performance, but minimum performance for gaming. And I think from what I've heard is there are some third-party devs now saying that this year 2022 is pretty much the last year where you have last gen versions of
Mm.
every third-party game. So I think the answer is it's probably going to be a perfect storm in the same way we had a perfect storm for shortages a couple years ago. We had a once in a century pandemic issue. We had pent up demand, because of that, and because of people waiting for the newest tech. We had let me try to think of like we had war, we had all these reasons that mining, we had all these things happened at once where it caused a shortage. And I feel like at the end of this year it's the flip. I know people keep some companies like Nvidia, though they're backtracking now on this, we're like, we're going to have shortages till 2024. It's like, well, that's what they're going to tell people because they don't want you to wait to buy something. But I'm sorry guys, like what I'm hearing from people that like warehouses of Ampere cards that they could lower the price if they need to. They really don't want to. And like you see like 3090s hitting eBay for a grand or less all of a sudden. I just think at the end of this year we're gonna have like $400, $300 3070s, $400 3080s. We're going to have the most competitive GPU generation we've seen maybe for a decade or more from AMD and Nvidia. And this is going to come off the back of, unfortunately, some sort of recession that's going to make people less likely to buy a $2,000 graphics card. And I look at all of this and then at the same time, devs being like, finally, we're done with the PS4. And I'm like, no, I think next year is where graphics are going to get pretty exciting, you know, and it's going to be because of all of these things. This summer, whether you're getting exercise outside or finding ways to stay active indoors like me, it's always nice to have something around that acts as a quick and tasty meal that's also healthy, full of protein, and reasonably priced. For me, that's Vite Ramen, who is a sponsor of this piece of content. Vite Ramen is an American company that pays its workers fair wages and crafts a protein and nutrient-dense meal that takes minutes to make without sacrificing taste. In fact, it's even quicker now with Ramen Go, a product that offers the same calories and taste as their traditional V3 packages you're probably used to now if you're a follower of this channel, while allowing you to even more quickly make your food or bring it to work for lunch. And they keep updating their recipes, like the new V3 edition of beef pho, so you keep having fun new flavors to try. Click the link in the description and use the offer code BROKENSILICON to save 10% off a variety of different special bundles just for Moore's Law fans that include things like spoons, chopsticks, and more if you so choose. This is a great deal for you, and it helps support this channel tremendously. Seriously, I eat it. It's tasty, it's healthy, it's fast. They keep making even better and better recipes that are quicker and quicker to make, and it's reasonably priced. Try Vite Ramen today. Let me see here. So Riza writes in, or he says that's Riza, not Riza. Y as in sky. Well, he changed his Patreon name, so I'd say his name correctly. I'm sorry. So Riza5 writes in, and he says, so many of us have waited this long without upgrading to a new GPU. I'm still happily using my 1080 Ti, Bright 21 by 9 1440 monitor at 100 hertz. And Nvidia is apparently having a hard time moving the remaining 3000 series stock. On the one hand, this may pressure Nvidia to set reasonable prices for upcoming 4000 series cards, but I have to wonder if the gaming community is just better informed because of channels like Moore's Law is Dead and others about the pent-up demand, and they're just going to refuse to buy it. What do you think? And then, actually, let me just throw in Kenahoon's question as well. He says, Tom and Bradley, I want to talk about the pricing. Do you really think Nvidia and AMD are going to charge $2,000 for the next gen top cards? We're already seeing 3090s fall in price towards the 3090s original MSRP. Yeah, I've seen $1,600 3090 Ti's already. Like, can they really afford to charge $2,000 for a flagship when it sounds like a 7700 XT is going to be below 600? Like, who is actually going to pay over $800 for this? So yeah, combining that, like, what do you expect out of, and I'm just kind of springboarding this into this whole conversation here, out of next generation Lovelace RDNA 3? First of all, pricing, but then anything else you want to talk about too.
Well, I do remember like the last time this kind of happened. It was like what 2016, I think, again that we had like a huge shortage for a while, and then like a glut, and then new GPUs came out. I think
Yeah,
that
I
was the
think like
10 series.
2019 is where things basically completely crashed. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to think history repeats itself, and we might have that again, which would be awesome. Just coming from a PCVR side, like I don't think there's gonna be $2,000 cards. I think that would be crazy in today's climate.
Well, if there is, I don't know how much it matters either.
Hmm.
Like, here's the problem though, is, I did these like leaks in late 2020 about Nvidia's early pricing for some of their higher end products,
Right.
and how that really fancy Founders cooler really wasn't very profitable on the 3080 for $700. And there's a reason you saw AIBs selling cheaper coolers for $800, $900 just at launch. Like, it wasn't that profitable, and 4 nanometer is double the price of what Samsung's
Mm.
charging for 8 at least. And they're putting all this GDR, all this really expensive RAM on there. They're using massive dies. I'm just being honest. Think I don't think the 4090 is profitable below like $900 or something. So I'm not sure Right, but I would say that I doubt they're going to throw on these ridiculous $200 margins, but I don't think they can charge a small amount for those top ones. I don't I guess we're gonna have to see. It would be fascinating if they can't lower prices below a certain amount, and the entire community is like, "Well, guess you can't. We don't wanna pay $2,000."
Yeah, I just think again they're gonna have to compete with all the cards that are gonna be on the second hand market, and that's a lot of cards,
Mhm.
ridiculous amount.
All right, I like to ask all my guests this question. Illyrium writes in, he says, "Hey Tom and Bradley, I wanted to ask you if there is literally a TDP limit or temperature output limit to your graphics card, a line that you would not cross." Well, let me go first and say I don't care what the temperature output is as long as they prove it doesn't break. Like whatever, I'm not gonna armchair engineer these companies. I think there are some cards that were literally designed for 95 watts. I mean, 95 Celsius. I think there were some cards like 3090s breaking where no, I think they did push it a little too hard. But is there literally a power consumption? Because I'm sure you've seen the rumors of how high power might go for at least Nvidia cards. Is there literally a TDP where you're like, I'm not buying it? Like, what is there a line?
No, not for me. I'm a
900
very
watts, triple a 3080. Basically, you just say, bring it up.
I'm kinda I don't know, I've always been a very enthusiast person, so I guess ideally I wouldn't wanna have more than 700, but if something was, like, really insane and proved it, like, in a cost performance thing, I'll be like, "Sure, I don't care how much power I spend, I don't care."
It's funny, I brought this up to a lot of people, and, what the first thing a lot of people usually say back to me is, "Well, anyone buying the $2,000 card is someone who's willing to go the extra mile for the performance anyways." So, I think the limit is just what trips the breaker then, which
Yeah.
I think is about 800 watts, by the way, for most US
Okay.
households. So, um, let me move on then to some of the final questions here. And this is the one that kind of delayed us starting by like 5 minutes as I was talking to a source about it. So Amigo Garrigo writes in and he says, "Hello, Tom and Bradley. Have you heard the rumors that some Zen 4 CPUs might launch on AM4? Of course, then with DDR4 support. Can you confirm or deny them? It sounds strange to me." Now, let me just ask you, have you heard these rumors at all or seen this pop up, or is this something that's occurred to you?
I saw only one article about it, like, it was, like, a week ago. I didn't really yeah.
So I'm going to be honest. Like, I've seen this pop up in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord. I don't know, maybe like a couple times in the past week. And I always just saw it as one of those things like, what? I don't know. And before we started recording, I actually reached out to a contact, and it sounds like it's possible, actually, guys. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't want to disclose too much yet because if I can do a full like leak about it, I'd rather it be complete and well researched. But what I can say is, I thought it sounded ridiculous just because from a positioning point of view, but it sounds like what I can confirm is it's not something AMD isn't directly considering doing. Like, it's not like it's possible. It's like, no, that they're thinking about it. I just don't want to get in depth on it and have it be like that Zen 3 Plus Warhol thing that never came out. Although I don't know what's your current system. What do you have for a CPU, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, not at all, a 5900X.
Right. Perfect. So you also have an AM4 system. I have a
Yeah.
3950X. You have the 12 core, but a generation newer than mine. So, from my perspective, what I always wonder is why would AMD put all of this money into retracing Zen 4? Presumably, it would have to work with the existing IO die they have, I assume. I don't think they're going to make a custom one for that. That sounds like millions of dollars of work for some weird Band-Aid product. But but then they'd have to like do all the tracing inside the PCB to reroute stuff. From what I've heard from an AMD contact today, like there's a lot of concerns about modulating power in it because Zen 4 uses entirely different voltage standards. Let's say they figure all of that out though. The thing I come back to is, why don't they just launch a Vcache 16 core and call it a day? Like all of this work to launch Zen 4 on AM4, why would you do that when you're transitioning to the next generation of server chips, you just launched the 16 core Zen 3D. Like, why not? Is that not good enough? And I don't know what you think about that. I guess my question is, how happy would you be to upgrade to Zen 4 if you found out you could put it in your existing motherboard?
It sounds like the benefits wouldn't be.
It'd be better than what you have now, but it'd probably just be clocked
I think it goes
slightly
back.
lower.
Yeah, I think it goes back to our discussion how like like I never felt the need that to upgrade my CPU too much. It's always been GPU for gaming and stuff. So I don't know. I don't. I think if I would wanted to upgrade to Zen 4, I would want to get the new standard because there's a lot more benefits that come with the AM5 standard that AM4 doesn't have, and it's nothing really to do with the CPU itself.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I would say because I'm on Zen 2, I would actually probably buy it if the performance was there, but and I guess that is a way to stop everyone with an AM4 system from getting Raptor Lake just overnight. Is like, "Hey,
Mm,
why would you do that when you can just put Zen 4 in here?" And then you could just sell like, $80 B550 motherboards with it.
mm.
That's what I'm wondering if they would do that, but at the same time, I just keep going back to, isn't the 5800X 3D good enough with a budget motherboard? I don't know.
It just sounds like a marketing thing at a time where like people might be too afraid to upgrade like their entire motherboard and stuff in
And
general.
DDR5 pricing, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So that
It
might be
it'd be
all it
it'd
is.
have to be, like, right place, right time is why they would do it, but yeah, I guess to close out that conversation, all I can say, Amigo Garrigo is, apparently it's possible, but I would not bet money on it happening right now. Alright, so I have some last VR questions here, getting off of the, more off subject to what you usually cover stuff. I've got a couple of goofy ones actually. So Yoda King writes in. He says, "Hi Tom and Bradley. What are your thoughts on Nvidia? I'm sorry, on Nintendo approaching something for VR? Will the Switch ever be able to host compelling VR experiences?" Well, I answer that no. But like, what do you think about Nintendo ever bothering with VR? Is you follow VR closely? Has that ever popped up? Any rumors about that popped up on your radar?
No serious rumor has ever popped up of them interested in it. It's always yeah, nothing serious. But I do want to say, like, we were talking about how Meta is worried about another company ever hopping in with a low end thing. The one thing I think Nintendo, if they ever did decide they wanted to go into VR, I think they would also target the low end. They've always been good at like pushing the low end hardware to provide good software and experiences. And if they did, I think Meta's low end market would be very difficult to compete with that. But yeah, I've never heard anything like recently.
Substantial. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, have you literally ever heard anything at all that seemed like a real rumor? Like outside of just like someone saying in the comments, "Is Nintendo gonna do it?"
No, never.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I could come up with for why they might is your argument for like them using Little Phoenix for both the Steam Deck 2 and a Hollow Deck is maybe because they have that SoC sitting around, they could make it, but I don't know. That's a lot of work for a small company.
The one thing, like for Nintendo, like they've learned how to transition their devs to ARM. They could literally do something similar to the Quest 2, just have Snapdragon and build if they did like Nintendo, Mario, Donkey
Mhm.
Kong. That would do well. They just don't seem to care about it right now.
You're saying they should just make the games for the Quest 2?
Yeah, but I don't see them doing that either.
I
So
know. I've been wondering for like a decade why. For me, the thing with Nintendo that keeps making me just like wake up in like cold sweats with how annoyed I get about this is why isn't there an iOS and Android port of like Pokemon Yellow? You could
yeah.
sell it for $10. Do you hate making money? Like, look at all these Nintendo emulators on mobile. You can sell them directly, dude. What are you? You don't need to sell the Switch games. You can sell the nostalgia ones and people will buy them in mass. What are you doing? Millions of just billions in sales is what you would look at how much money you made from Pokemon Go. What do you think you would make?
Yeah, they're a bizarre company, but I don't know.
Who are we to say they're making lots of money right
Yeah, they
now?
are.
So
And they,
Um,
they, they make a probably good profit on their actual switches to begin with. So like,
although I mean, it's probably like $100 to make one of those
yeah.
god dang things at this point. It's a 720p display, but let me ask you, what do you think about like Xbox and VR? And I only ask because we've talked about everyone else, and I do get these questions every now and then. Like, do you think they're going to try anything?
No, I don't actually. I think if they ever do try something, they might be more likely to release games on other platforms for VR if they ever decided to than I would say Nintendo is. But from what I hear, well, first of all, their XR division is a mess, and that
Mm,
includes like Hololens and everything. They've gotten to the point where they for their next, so they are working on like a mixed reality thing, but what they're really doing is they're giving money to Samsung, they're giving money to Qualcomm and like all these other companies to basically build their device, and they're going to slap their Windows software onto it, like with their know-how. And they've had a lot of trouble just in general with XR, and I just don't see them. I they've been asked a lot and like publicly about if they would ever do like an Xbox VR, but they've always said, "Yeah, we're not interested at all." And I believe them. I think their XR hardware stuff is just a little bit of a mess, very unorganized.
yeah, all I can ever say to people who ask me is I've literally zero whispers about them
Yeah,
working on anything having to do with VR. And the
yeah,
answer I also always give is, how does that work with streaming? Because that's how they want to make money. You cannot
mhm,
stream VR.
yeah,
Sony is using an old fashioned business model. You can't do that over streaming, hence why Sony sees a reason to focus on VR and Microsoft doesn't. Um, let me see here. So Gus writes in, "Hi, Tom and Bradley. In a similar vein as the question to, I believe, was a government engineer or someone else on a previous Vulcan Silicon, how do you see movement in VR evolving? Are there developments you've seen or you would like to see in that area? I hope this question is more concise than the last time and you don't need to rewrite it as much. Gus, I could just read it from start to finish this time. No worries, my man. But yeah, like, and that is a major problem in VR. Like, how do you see movement evolving? Because I do think it's very clumsy in Half-Life Alex even.
yeah. Well, for I think hardware is starting to make big progresses. I said earlier in this podcast that it's all been about taking mobile like lines that are dedicated to mobile phones. Well, we're at the point in the industry where players like Apple are getting serious. They're going to release something. And it's also at the same time that mobile phones as a market, you see the sales are slowly dipping. Like people are not interested in buying new phones every year. And that's reflecting in the actual fabs in China, for example. Like their component orders are getting cut, not even just related to this year, but like they've been slowly getting orders cut in general. So now it's time for the XR people who everyone in this like Silicon Valley, they're saying, "Oh, we think AR, XR is going to be the next big computing platform, but we need technologies that are focused for our devices, our hardware devices. We can't keep using the same displays you make for phones."
Mhm.
So that's why also like we talked about pancake lenses, but I think like technologies like OLED on silicon is going to be very big for this space. Apple's going to be like one of the first people to release a headset with it. It's one of those technologies that's also expensive. Basically, what OLED on silicon is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's so standard OLED that you have on phones. They're built on glass backplanes, but but the issue is there's a limit to PPI pixels per inch you can have on a glass backplane with getting the
Mm.
transistors on there. So people have just realized, and this is not a new topic. They call them OLED micro displays or all these other things. They've been around for almost like 20 years at this point. It's just they've been very niche. Like Sony cameras, the little viewfinders would use them. Very very niche concepts. So, but the industry is like, well, we can build these transistors that emit OLED in much higher PPIs, like almost 3,000 pixels per inch, and that will remove the screen door effect alone, which will make the experience look a lot better. And also, when you talk about pancake lenses, you want to raise the PPI because you're getting that display closer to the eye, and that's a huge. Like if you get a display closer to your eye, you might even see the screen door effect more. And all these factories, you'll hear if you search OLED on silicon, you'll see in China alone tons of new fabs being built for
Mhm.
this technology on AR, VR. And I think when the first device releases with pancake lenses and these OLED on silicon displays, people are like, okay, this headset is not only comfy, it looks amazing. It looks really good. So I think visuals will I think that will push the industry very fast, and Apple is going to be the first one to really get it out there. Apple joining any market in general just raises the
Mhm.
market value, and new factories are built hoping that Apple uses them and like all this stuff. There was an article literally 2 weeks ago that LG was building OLED on silicon fabs just for Apple's next second generation headset. And that'll be something every player can use. Amazon, Samsung, like all
Let
that.
let me ask about that. Way, so LG is building a factory already for the 2nd gen Apple headset? And,
Yeah,
like, this is, like is this, like, substantiated by, like, documents showing that that's what it's for? Or is it kind of like someone says that's what this is for?
so it's coming from it's coming from the elect, I think, who has a pretty good track record for a lot of these Korean company leaks, and they're saying that yeah, Apple. One of the reasons they're building it is for Apple's second generation because it's not going to be ready for like until 2024 at the earliest. And if Apple's releasing a headset early next year, obviously that's not going to be in time. So there probably is some sort of like maybe they heard it from someone or like whatever. But I think in general, even Meta, there was an event about a month ago that's called SID Display Week, which is like the big for display industry. That's the big event. It happens every year, and they showed out their outline of what display technologies they want to use, and they also are wanting to use micro OLED. Like all these big companies, Valve has been working to they've had micro OLED and like working together with companies for a while. AMD, if we're going to talk about AMD, the company that I watch a lot related to Valve that I think worked together to build a custom display. AMD also used to talk about this company a lot, and it was funny about this micro OLED company who's been building these displays for military purposes for a long
Mhm.
time. They're only in US for the military purposes, but their fab is at the New York Global Foundries fab, and they have a chip partner. They won't say who it is, so it's probably very likely that they have some sort of connection with AMD just because they've been put there like in 2015 when there was more Global Foundries AMD partnership stuff. So like you see a lot of these different companies, they're all very interested in OLED on silicon. I think it's going to be big things happening just from visuals that will put in the comfort that will push this industry further. Long answer, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I talked about this technology.
No, yeah, that's interesting, and the reason I asked about details around that rumor of LG building a factory for a 2nd generation is it's just like, well, I mean, from what I hear from people at Meta, they're just like, "Oh, by the way, Apple's making a VR headset.
Mm,
It's definitely coming." It's
yeah,
just like when you say, well, if it's literally in writing that there's a factory for a 2nd gen, it's like, guys, this isn't a rumor. This thing's coming out pretty soon
yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah,
Which I've heard it's gonna be announced very soon and come out this year.
yeah. That's what I was
Um,
hearing.
so but like, all right, that's that display, but what do you think about movement in VR video games? What do we
Sorry, I
do
did.
about that, Like,
So,
what
yeah, no, that's always been a difficult thing. But I think what people don't realize is if you improve displays, you have faster response times, and like, there's also things called a duty cycle, which displays already do this already. Like if you have a monitor, your monitor runs at 100% all time. But for VR uh, displays, you want them to run at 10% of the frame. So they actually pulse the display for 10% of the entire frame because that removes all the motion blur.
mm,
So you gotta make displays brighter because it also makes the displays a lot dimmer, especially when you start using pancake optics. Really, I think for the near term, the motion sickness problem can be solved with higher refresh rate, faster response time displays, and I think OLED on silicon can do that. So,
the question I had, though, is, like, using a joystick to move your character
oh
around.
well, that is but that is related to like the
Yeah.
movement. Like people get sick doing that right now because the displays are either just low response time or there's other reasons. But I think display like you're not gonna figure out you're honestly not gonna figure out a way unless like there is some research done that like for example PSVR 2 has haptics on the headset, and there's some research saying that if you like vibrate it a certain way when you do different things that it might actually solve the motion sickness. But I think we're going to be on joysticks type movement for a while.
Because, yeah, it is interesting, like, when I play Half-Life Alyx, you use a joystick or walk to move, and I have no problem moving my head. I never really get sick, but I do get sick if I'm moving my head while I'm walking with the joystick sometimes. Like, especially in kinetic firefights, it just becomes, whoa, I really actually get a little motion sick. You don't think there's an obvious way for us to fix the movement thing? Like, it's just like it is what it is. You need a big room and you're gonna have to use a joystick.
Yeah, I don't see it. There's a lot of bizarre research on it, and it's all comes back to you might need something really like a weird field giving off in your room or something. So yeah, I don't see that. That's why games need to have either joystick or teleport, because that's genuinely the two choices you can have for a while for gaming.
Mm-hmm. All right. Final question. Clean Sweep writes in and he says, "Hey, Tom and Bradley, I just finished watching the two-part video with Carl Guttag on augmented reality. Great videos, really easy to understand. One thing I noticed is that a lot of the problems brought up seem to only exist or are exacerbated by trying to implement augmented reality on a head-mounted device. In the short term to medium term, could we see a split in AR development where there's more of a mainstream adoption of AR in applications like vehicle windshields, display cases, and other non head mounted displays, while head mounted AR doesn't exist outside of the niches where Carl identified actual use cases, military, medical, enterprise, until the issue he identifies are overcome?"
Yeah, I think great question, by the way. I think, yeah, in that series I was talking to an electrical engineer. He's like responsible for sprites, like
Hmm.
sprites in the old been in the industry for many many years. Very cool guy, but he's very skeptical on AR, and he has a lot of reasons for it. But yeah, I do think the big issue with AR glasses and they call it optical AR, see through AR, is you can't. There's a lot of issues, but for the short term, I do think the applications you're saying for like windshields and stuff, anything that doesn't require moving an object in your visual field, where you can just plaster, like for example, a time or calories burnt or something, or just other HUD data. I honestly think that's the only stuff that's going to happen for consumers in any type of optical AR, including windshields. There's a lot of interest in doing that. Um, but yeah, I do think we'll start seeing that. Even the first, you always hear rumors that Apple is going to release their first optical or see-through AR device. And people are like, oh, it's going to replace the headset immediately,
Hmm.
even though that device is slated for like 2024, 2025, whatever they say. Apple does not have magic technology to solve all the problems with optical AR. I guarantee if they do release something like that, and Meta too, they're going to be called smart glasses. If they have a display projected on the screen, it's going to be like
Hmm.
Google Glass, where it's just notifications in your view that doesn't move when you move your head. It's just that's where the AR glasses technology is, and there is some benefits to it, but it's yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that is everything I had on the script for us to talk about. I mean, there were a couple times when we were talking where there's something that came up that you wanted to make sure you got out before we finished. I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about that you had that you think is important, related to these subjects that we haven't had a chance to get to?
I think we covered a lot. It's just really like I maybe because I watch this industry very closely, and I think it might surprise people how the growth might be really fast within the next year or two. A lot of it does have to do with Apple just increasing the market value, but people that have said that this space is a gimmick, I think they might want to pay attention to it more, because even though the headsets are probably going to be very expensive, there's going to be some use cases. I think people are just going to talk about it a lot more. But yeah, I'm just very grateful that you had me on here to talk about all these crazy things. Thank you.
No, yeah, of course. I will say this to that last thing you said though. I am getting because I kind of went through the history of recent VR stuff with my Oculus engineer guest. and I forgot how crowded the 2012 to 14 area was for VR. It really was as stupid as someone made a Oculus Kickstarter, and then snap your fingers next year. Sony, Samsung, everyone's talking about VR all of a sudden, and they were just ignoring it until a Kickstarter happened that got more success than almost any other Kickstarter before it. And I'm getting a similar feeling now to what I read about from articles back then, where we have a PSVR 2 coming out. We have multiple interesting things Valve's working on. We have Apple about to enter the space. And, say what you will about Apple, but look, smartwatches were pretty niche until the Apple Watch came out. Now everyone has a smartwatch. So get mad at them if you want, but it
Yeah.
is what it is. I don't know. I think that next year is going to be and the end of this year is going to be a very, very big 12 months for VR. And I think it's going to be I mean, if we're being honest, the past decade was kind of just the trial run before everyone really knows what they want to do, right?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that for sure.
Yeah, so I'm glad I had you on so I can start paying attention to this space before it blindsides all of us. And I guess, before we go, tell everyone where they can find you. There'll be a link in the description to your channel, but please plug yourself.
Yeah, so I do videos, youtube.com/SadlyItsBradley. I tweet a lot of what I find, Twitter, SadlyItsBradley. But the thing I've done more recently that I think if you like deep dives into how a lot of XR tech does, I do a lot of research on I couldn't even dive into them for this, but I do a lot of research onto how optics are working for VR, how displays are progressing, all these things. And go to sadlyinreality.com, and I'm going to start writing articles in depth about that. So hopefully you learn something.
Let me write that down, inreality.com. So I'll make sure to add that in the description as well. And yeah, it is funny. I put on some stuff while I was putting the script together with some of your interviews, and it did remind me a lot of getting just completely into the weeds, like when I was talking to like a memory engineer about like CXL and stuff, like stuff that you really get into that type of like broken silicon like depth, but for like lenses and all of that as well. And I'm just, everyone who follows me, I think you'll find his content very interesting if you like any of that stuff I'm doing. So, all right. Well, again, thanks for coming on. Thanks to everybody for listening. Check out Bradley, and also hopefully check out Broken Silicon every week. Subscribe to it on your podcast app of choice. Give us a review. Subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead on YouTube. Ring the bell button. Tell your friends about us. Buy 10 phones. Subscribe on all of them and download my podcast every week 10 times. And support, if you support us on Patreon, you can ask us questions. There's tons of exclusive content. But otherwise, thanks again for like the fifth time I've said in this past minute for coming on. And thank you to everybody for listening.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law's Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law's Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, AV, Anthony Gareffa, Greg Pataki, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Brett Jones, Aaron Close, Little Germany, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, Ivan K., Brian Riggleman, Joaquin Hagan, Sam Miller, Deke, Thomas Rupp, The Mechanical Philosopher, Terrence Herod, SNES Chalmers, Tom Bailey, Greg T. Wantek, Andrew S., Frank Zelensky, Daniel D., MJB1, Eric Jackson, Justice Brennan, Sammy Good, Valco Malev, The Boss Haas, Nicholas Buckner, Spamtum G. Spamtum, Jonathan, Michael Johnson, General Drips, Blake, Franco Frederic, Matthew Lazier, Jensen Wang, Nathan Mose, Azuris, Gregory S. Acker, Dominique Cock, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, My Name Is Nobody, Caillou Markelli, Hard4Room.com, Original Ross, Slicky, Stefan, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Christopher A. Butler, Jeremy Scalen, Sarcastro, Stephen Hart, Jason B., Meat and Pork, Stu, Tim Robb, Luis Correa, Ian Clifford, Jesse Jeskowiak, Travis Gooding, Holden Mobley, Nanyan, Chris Rich, Deepest Learners, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Chuck Glidden, Sammy Malas, Greg, Autrini, Patrick Groh, Amiable Chief, Brett Summers, Danny Nugent, Stephen Dick, Tommy, Kundin, Brucha, Mark Mitchell, Mac Daffy, Delmaine Peterson, James Anderson, Y. Trui, Mark Raidmaker, Seth Domings, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Norithiel, Matthew Landavaza, Stefan, Colatic, Henry Zhang, Judson N, F7GOS, The Grid, Michelle Pell, D31337 Antics, Jason Bowen, Noah Nocoella, Hexapuma, Chrysantine, Jerome Ferriera, Zapito3, D6, Thomas A. Teff, Klein Britannian, DNA Tech, 50C Desert, Axel Cisneros, Royce Meyer, Charles Russell, Reginald Aria, Morpheus, Tika Autumn, Jackson Miller, JSMMH, Sandy Garrido Saunderson, David Eastling, Cameron, Andre Jacques, Gamen Since Reagan, Jeff Sadler, Eric Osborne, Loophole 35, Windstar, Joker, James I. Radner, Corey Leonard, Sammy Molas, John Shin, and thank you to Sahara for the music.